He talked about, yeah, he also talked about, oh yeah, it's over. And if anybody's wearing a mask, they better be trying to rob me because, you know, and all of that. And so when you have social, we were talking about the impact of social pressure, community pressure, societal pressure to just move forward as if COVID is over. And there were a number of you who have referred to Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, and I do follow his work, but I also, one of the things that we're going to do tonight will be to have a discussion about, I'm going to review what he talked about on his Twitter broadcast last week. I want to share some of that with you. There were over 1,800 people on that Twitter conversation or who listened to it. There were about 200 of us on the actual broadcast itself. But you're not alone. You're not alone in your concern, and you're not alone in understanding that COVID is not over. And in fact, I would venture to say that the people in this group, in some ways, in some very significant ways, especially when it comes to the biosafety protocols, I would bet to say that this group really is ahead of the curve in terms of their knowledge and expertise than even the folks that we were listening to. So, so no further ado. Oh, somebody mentioned that they were on and it was very good. Yes, it was very good. And so when I get to that part, Carol, when we get to that part, I'd be happy to have you come chime in and also share some of the insights or some of the things that you picked up. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to share content. So I do have a presentation tonight. And how do I get to there? Okay, we're going to share content and microphone. I'm going to start broadcast. Okay, and we are. So it's not over till it's over, part 2. Okay, folks. So just wanted to, as usual, we look at the stats. It hasn't much hasn't changed from last week to this week. So this is 9/24/2022, and then the 10/1/2022. A whole lot has not changed except for that little green piece. It's gotten a little, just an inchy bit bigger, not a whole lot. So the good news is that whatever that is, a BF7, it is not doubling. We were real concerned when things double, because then that means that it's moving fast. So if you look at the difference between BA5 last week and BA5 this week, there's not much of a difference. BA4.6 went up just a little bit. BF7 went up just a little bit. So they're not, it's pretty much holding so far that those are going to be the top 3 variants of concern. And they're pretty much, it's BA5 is the major Omicron variant, and it's pretty much holding. Not much has changed. If you look at infection rates by variants across the country, not much has changed. The one to the map to the left is last week's map. The map to the right is this week's map. So not much has changed. The proportions have pretty much stayed the same. But I will say this. This was interesting. When I saw this today, and I saw that the death rate had fallen, they claim, by 68%. Now, I don't know if that's an error, because I would think that if the death rate had really fallen that much and it was real, we would be, sipping champagne, saying hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, and all of that. So I'm not quite sure what's happening with the CDC reporting on that. But if the death rates are continuing to go down, that's great. Um, Last week we talked about a person who believed that COVID was over. So she had gotten lax on her biosafety protocols. She got COVID, although she was vaccinated and all that, she got COVID and ended up dying within 10 days, I believe. And this was a friend of somebody that's a part of our group. Um, so there can be some dangers in thinking that COVID is over, particularly for those of us who are older and or immunocompromised and or have any kind of comorbidities, et cetera, et cetera. I ran across this group, Ipsos Axos, does a public opinion poll around how Americans are responding or thinking about COVID. And they've been doing a monthly survey pretty much around and pretty much asking some of the same questions from month to month to month. But as we all have been surmising, Americans are returning to their pre-COVID life prior to the pandemic, although most of the vast majority agree that COVID has changed American lives forever. The concern about COVID, of course, is dropping. More people are returning to their pre-COVID lives. Although, on some level, I'm not against that. I think we should try to go back to our pre-COVID lives. Wearing a mask outside the home, at least sometimes, of course, mask wearing has dropped down precipitously. The fact that people know that, well, it's a good thing that people know we will never fully be rid of the virus perhaps in their lifetime. That's good that people know that. I mean, it's just like we know that AIDS is not gone. I think that, what's interesting about when we talk about AIDS is that they're working on zero transmission. And sorry about that. Dang it. Oops. Uh, Hi, Shirley. I have to figure out a way to turn my notifications off on my phone because that's what started the. Turn my phone off. Okay, sharing screen. Sorry about that. Okay, hold on just a second. Let me figure out how to turn my phone off. So we know that, so these four stems that COVID has changed American lives forever, that people believe that or agree with that, that's good. That they know that people are aware that we will never fully be rid of the virus in their lifetime. That's good. They recognize that. And it's good to recognize that we are in a better place than we were a year ago when it comes to COVID. And that people feel more, for the most part, people feel that the pandemic related shutdowns in early 2020 were necessary to save lives. That's all very, those are very good and salient points. I'm glad that the American public gets it. But some of the detailed findings that came out of that study is that, and this is what I would find probably a little bit more disturbing. While most Americans say they believe there's still a possibility of them catching COVID, their perceived risk of contracting the virus continues to decline. Many indicate that they already have returned to their normal pre-COVID life. Again, it's not about returning to their pre-COVID life that's an issue here. It's about their perceived risk of contracting the virus that's problematic. More Americans now believe that out of home behavior, such as attending in-person gatherings, dining at a restaurant, taking a vacation, and attending a sporting event, pose no risk to their health than they did in mid-August of this year. So they don't see those activities as being risky. The share of Americans who report being concerned about COVID-19 is among the lowest captured throughout the pandemic. Of those who are concerned, a plurality is more concerned about spreading the virus to people who are at higher risk of serious illness than for themselves, whether it's developing long COVID, being hospitalized, or dying. So a lot of people in here in America are thinking that, they're thinking that they're immune, or that they're not vulnerable to COVID. And we also have to remember that the American public probably has the highest rate of comorbidities than other countries across the globe. So, interesting. Nearly 2 in 3 say there is a small or no risk in returning to their normal pre-COVID lives. More Americans now say they already have returned to their normal pre-COVID life than at any point during the pandemic. And about 11% say there is no risk of them contracting COVID. So we know that, mask use is going down. Most of them said Americans report wearing masks in different rates depending on what they are doing out of their home. For those that do report wearing masks regularly, some feel self-conscious. So again, that's that whole notion of you got to do something, or you're doing something that very few other people are doing. And can you feel okay about that? Do you feel okay about that? Roughly, let's see. Now, so we know that more than half of Americans reported having COVID. And in fact, this slide is a little bit old, because I think they report that about 70% of the population, or 60% of the American population has had COVID, and about 70%, if you look at it, of African Americans, 70% of African Americans have had COVID. 68% of Americans who have had COVID and are vaccinated say they had a breakthrough infection. So on some level, people are beginning to understand that the vaccines don't keep you from getting an infection. 38% of Americans know someone who has been reinfected with COVID in the past few weeks. So not just who's gotten an infection, but somebody that's gotten infected more than once. Perceptions of the virus risk have declined. People are not, and what was most discerning is that despite knowing all of this, people are not changing their behavior. Among those who have taken a vacation in the past 3 months, few report taking extra precautions to prevent contracting COVID before their trip. Just around a quarter of these travelers say they have limited dining indoors or attended indoor events, taken an at-home COVID test, worn a mask indoors more frequently, or limited seeing people outside of their households. The most practiced behavior, washing or sanitizing hands more frequently, but fewer than half report doing this. So that means even hand washing is going away. And they said 45%. That's just disturbing, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, about why. There are signs that more Americans may be tuning out specific details related to the pandemic, as familiarity with things like new variants and rebound infections is relatively low. 38% say they are very or somewhat familiar with the new variant, also known as Omicron BA.5. So that's 38%. I bet you 100% of the people on this call know about Omicron BA.5. 1 in 3 are at least somewhat familiar with recent news reports about COVID-19 rebound infection, but only 4% report knowing someone who has experienced this after taking Paxlovid. I bet you that more than 33% of the people on this call, I imagine that pretty much all of you know about Paxlovid, know a whole lot about Paxlovid, know about Paxlovid, know about what questions you need to ask, about drug interactions, when you need to start taking it, the whole 9 yards. Just 1 in 4 are familiar with Paxlovid. So that's like only 25% of the American public that they surveyed even was familiar about it. While half of Americans correctly identified that studies suggest that prior COVID-19 infections or antibodies from vaccines may not protect against the latest coronavirus variant, BA.5, 40% of Americans are unsure whether the statement is true or false. That's concerning because it means that the information in terms of the science and the facts are not getting to the general public in a way that's powerful or in a way that resonates. The poll also finds that, and this was back in July, middle of July. So the woman who said she believed COVID was over was not alone. 1 in 3 believed that the pandemic was over. So she was not alone in that belief in terms of thinking that it was over. And even more so now. I mean, there are more people even thinking that now. So in light of all that, while we may know that, yeah, the pandemic's not over, that is not the context in which we live our lives. The people in this group, that is not the context that the people in this group live our lives. It's not the context that people like Eric Ding Feigl or the folks who are part of World Health Network or the 200 something people who were on that call, the 1,800 people who eventually listened to the call. That is not their understanding of a very different context. And, it makes it more challenging to move when, the rest of the world is moving in a different direction. Okay, now I know you've seen this slide before. How can we know when the pandemic is over? Well, we certainly don't have a cure for COVID. We've talked about that. And yes, I've been focusing on return to pre-pandemic levels of flu, hospitalizations, and deaths. COVID, and we talked about last week, we talked about COVID being no longer detected in the wastewater, and we know that it is, and that in half of the states has actually gone up. And we've also talked about return to pre-pandemic levels of social activity, but learning to live with a new normal and defining what that new normal was. And for us, we've been talking about, with the biosafety protocols in place. Tonight I'm going to talk about another way to think about that new normal. And it was actually what came out of the discussion with Dr. Eric Feigl Ding last week. So just to give you a little bit about who he is, he's well educated. He's got all the, at least the educational background that one could hope for. He's a longstanding reputation. I think, initially at the very beginning of this pandemic, he did a Twitter thread or Twitter post that they call it the Holy Mother of God Twitter thread, in which he talked about, he raised the alarm that the Wuhan virus was going to be have a crazy R naught. And he talked about an R naught of about 3.8. And they taught him crazy. They said he was out of his mind. The other scientists were like getting on his case about how wrong he was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turns out that he was not only right, but he also underestimated what the eventual R naught was going to be. Okay, because now we recognize that it's higher than measles and it's closer to 12 or 13 at this point with Omicron B5. So, yeah, he had to wait 2 years, or maybe about a year and a half, but it panned out that this was exactly what it was, and it was exactly what he said. So he was right. For those of you who want to, I'm going to do an overview of what we talked about, But for those of you who want to rehear for yourself, you can. The conversation was recorded, and that is the link on the slide. And I believe the link is also in the chat for those who um, want to listen to it on your own and get a more, a broader and hear the full conversation and really immerse yourself into the fullness of that conversation. So I think it's good for us to be around and to be embedded into and to surround ourselves with other folks who are thinking about COVID and putting in similar ways. As I realize that sometimes we are asking you, and you are asking people that are around you that you love, to do something that is far against the grain of what everybody else is doing. You're asking them to swim upstream, and all the salmon are going downstream, or however way, whatever analogy you want to use. The bottom line is, you know, you're asking them to do something where everybody else is rushing to go against the grain, basically. So I just want to cover some of the highlights of some of the things that Dr. Eric Feigl-Dean talked about. They started off talking about long COVID, and there was with good reason, because at the beginning of this pandemic, we didn't know about such a thing called long COVID. It wasn't even a part of our landscape or thinking about long-term or longer-term health impacts from having the flu. COVID acts differently from a regular cold or flu, because in a regular cold or flu, we don't anticipate having, long-term impacts or long-term health issues as a result of experiencing the flu. I have my and she's giving me permission to say this, but you've met Jennifer Jones, who does the event planning. She had COVID very early on, like probably even before they even knew it was COVID. And that was back in March. I think she said like end of February, beginning of March of 2020. Here it is almost 3 years later, and she still has, she cannot drink pop. It tastes like metal. She still has some issues with her taste and smell. There's certain things she cannot smell, and there's some certain things she no longer, her taste buds have changed. So that means that there's some neurological, and I would think permanent neurological changes that have been made if we're talking almost 3 years later. This March will be 3 years. So COVID acts different from a regular cold and flu. And what we were not prepared for was that there was going to be such a thing called long COVID and the illnesses that were going to be a sequelae of having gotten COVID. We know that the virus stays in the body longer. It is different in that it is one of the most mutagenic viruses that the medical and the scientific field has encountered. It acts differently in that it can be transmitted without the infected person having symptoms. That's unusual. And after 5 days, even though that, they're telling people that after 5 days, you can go back amongst the people as long as you're masked or whatever, they're saying they're now, Dr. Ding was saying that after 5 days, it's very likely that you have not cleared the infection. So that was all the 5-day, isolation piece was only, it's more about politics than it is about health or science. We mentioned, he talked about the current vaccines and that they were created to prevent hospitalization and death, not infection or transmission. So in some ways, and what that means then is that, yeah, it was great. They warp speed, got a vaccine out, but in some ways it's not a traditional vaccine. So traditional vaccines do stop transmission and infection, but the mRNAs do not. They don't do that. So that's a problem. And the reason why that's a problem is because every time you get COVID, you increase the risk of getting long COVID. Reinfection is possible because you can get infected by a new mutated version. You can get reinfected by the same version, and you can get reinfected by a new mutated version. And it's random whether the second infection will be milder or worse. So just because you had COVID once, and maybe it was mild, or maybe you didn't have any symptoms, that doesn't mean that the next time you get it, it's going to be as mild, or it might kick you off your feet. Now, as a psychologist, one of the things that I recognize is that people have a difficult time learning from experiences if the experience is different and erratic. Okay, so and what I mean by this is, people are much more able to learn from experiences where the outcome is the same. Every time something happens, the outcome is the same. So, so if I have say, let me give you an example. If I have a Skittle in my hand and I open my hand and I know it's going to drop to the floor, and every time it's going to drop to the floor, every time. It was, babies play that game all the time. They have something in their hands and they drop it and they're looking to see that it falls to the floor. And it happens every time. So we like things that act consistently and regularly the same way. When something is not consistent and regular, it's easier to get confused. So if one time we opened up our hand and the Skittle started to float, or the next time we opened up our hand and the Skittle fell, or the next time we opened up our hand and the Skittle actually rose, we would have a harder time understanding the principles around the Skittle's behavior. Okay, I know that's not the most elegant analogy, but it's the only one I can come up with off the top of my head. My only meaning to say is that when people are, when circumstances are erratic, when they don't happen the same way every time, people have a harder time learning from that experience. So let's think about it in terms of COVID. Somebody has COVID once, and they're thinking, "Oh, well, it wasn't a big deal. I had it, and it was nothing." And and they're not even thinking about, as you all were probably thinking about what it means to get it a second time, or what it might mean to get it a third time. They're just thinking, "Oh, I get it once, and and I'll be fine." And they may not really understand the impact of how deleterious it is to get COVID till the second or third time they get it, and it knocks them off their feet and they get long COVID. They're saying that a third of the people who get COVID have some kind of long COVID experience afterwards. So it may take 3 or 4 times of getting it before somebody sees themselves in a position where they have long COVID. And we don't want people to get to that point. But it's going to take people. Some people may not see it. because they got it once and it wasn't anything. One of the things that they definitely talked about on the show was that it was absolutely safer to reduce your risk of getting infection, and um, that the United States was going in the wrong direction because the focus needs to be um, reducing your risk of getting the infection. Don't get COVID. And the direction that the government is going and the country is going and society is going is more like, don't worry about getting COVID. You won't die from it. You won't. Or you might not die from it, or you might not get hospitalized, or what have you. Don't worry about it. And he's saying, yeah, you should, because you don't know what the long-term implications are going to be with having a chronic disorder. And for those people who are at risk, even though they may be vaccinated, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't get infected, which then in turn means that they could also risk hospitalization or death. Um, Long COVID, one of the things they also talked about was that long COVID can happen even with a person who has, asymptomatic or mild, asymptomatic infection or a mild case of COVID. So, um, so those were the things that I think for us, I felt really good about the fact that our group has been focusing on not getting COVID, and even for those who have gotten it, about not getting COVID again, and really trying to be more faithful and rigorous with maintaining the biosafety protocols. That's important. They then went into a conversation about some of the other types of vaccines that are coming out and are being developed in other parts of the world. One of them is, or one type of vaccine that they're looking at are the intranasal vaccines, because they think that those will cut transmission. And that's where he feels that's where we should be focusing on, is actual vaccines that actually cut transmission and infection. Um, so, because the COVID is airborne, the first the first layer of our immune system actually happens within our nose. And so if you can, what they call it, increase mucosal immunity, then you can reduce transmission and infection that way. And so he's saying that the vaccines that are being developed in other countries that focus on that should be the focus of our attention at this point. We got a lock on, hospitalizations and deaths, but that's not all. It's important that we be in good health, not just simply that we don't die or become hospitalized. Um, he also talked about having that it's going to be important to have more durable vaccines, meaning that they need to last longer. These vaccines need to, whatever vaccines we come up with, we can't expect people to get on a vaccine regimen where they're going to take a new vaccine or every 6 months. We need something that's going to last 2 or 3 years, in much the same way that we do like with tetanus or with polio or with some of the other measles or some of the other vaccines that either give you lifelong immunity, if that's possible, but at least something that's going to last a couple of years. But not only is going to last longer, but also one that's also going to protect against long COVID. And that those types of vaccines need to be on the warp speed program, just as they put the Pfizer and the Moderna on warp speed. The nasal vaccinations, the intranasal vaccinations, and the research on those types of vaccinations need to be put on warp speed in terms of their development. And he also talked about the need for a real early treatment that reduces the risk of long COVID. while they're looking at Paxlovid right now, in terms, they're just starting to do research now about does it reduce long COVID. They're not certain that it really has an impact on long COVID per se. And then he went on to, he talked about Novavax. It is a primary vaccine, and he thinks it has broader protection than the first series of Pfizer or Moderna. So for those who have not taken a Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, the RNA-based vaccines, Novavax, the early research seems to show that it is a much better vaccine in terms of providing not only, well, of course, the Wuhan is no longer here, but against the other variants that have also come up, that it's a better vaccine in terms of its efficacy with the different variants that have come about. In terms of biosafety, the discussion that the group talked about was, it seemed to me like that, they were still focusing on masks. And I don't have any issue about masks, but it seemed like they were also just getting to the issue around having a high quality mask. Now, we started talking about high quality masks last year and went to a deep dive and discussion about that cloth masks really aren't really helpful, and that you need it at least at very bare minimum N95, preferably something that had a much higher filtration rate in 99. And and even for those of us who were able to get them, the Living Guard mask, which actually kills COVID. So I think our mask discussions have been way more sophisticated and forward thinking than they are at this point. They also talked about places focusing on air filtration and having some standards regarding air filtration in public spaces. Again, I think, we have, our group has been discussing air filtration and the events that, we're talking about having. We talked about that like when Shirley's birthday party, about making sure that there were air purifiers all throughout the room and throughout the space. I think that our group has been much further ahead in terms of thinking about that and implementing and acting not only privately but also in our public spaces and gatherings regarding air filtration and looking at the quality of that as we move through our navigating our lives. Okay, so that was sort of the basic stuff. One of the things so that's sort of the basics of what Eric Feigl and that group talked about. I did learn a few other things as well, but I want to stop here and pause and give Carol an opportunity to speak. I'm going to stop the share for a moment.
Oh, I don't really have a whole lot to add. One of the things that I do remember that caught my attention was when they were talking about the testing and talking about the proper swabbing and how
Yes.
we're probably not swabbing correctly. And so we may be getting false negatives when we really are positive. And he talked about how in Canada, and I meant to go look it up to see what the protocol was. In Canada, how they teach their swabbing the back of the throat as well as the cheeks,
That's
and
correct.
then the nasal passages, because he said he knows that people are not swabbing as far back in their nasal passages as they need to do it. And that's even the people who are doing it professionally in places where they're testing. So that was one of the things that caught my attention, that I remember offhand, because I was doing other things, because I actually forgot about it at first, and then I thought about it, and it was already like 15, 20 minutes in.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember, I did remember that.
Yeah, that one was a big point. I did write some notes down about that, the antigen test that most of us have been using, that that in other countries they do they swab in 3 places. And you're right, Carol. Um, they mentioned that we're probably getting a lot of false negatives because we're not getting enough material for the antigen test. Not only because it could be in various places in our body. So one of them was the side of the cheek. One was think about when they, the throat, deep down inside of the throat, and that you swab those first inside your mouth first. And then you go up into your nose. And now they're talking about how people are swabbing like right in here, whereas you need to go like up near here in this part of the nose, more towards the bridge, to get a good sample. They also talked about how when you put it in your nose, to hold it there for 10 seconds, that you need to avoid drinking water or anything else before swabbing, and you need to blow your nose before you swab. They think that if we move to the three spot swabbing, the 3 areas, that we probably would find the virus earlier by at least 1 day.
Was it 30 minutes? Was it 30 minutes before drinking of the water?
Yes, avoid drinking water or anything else before swabbing your mouth. Yeah. And what that means then, if you find the virus at least a day earlier, the quicker you can start taking medication, for those who might need to take medication, the quicker you jump on it, the faster and the easier it will be to get rid of COVID and get rid of your symptoms. So that was important.
I also thought of something, and I can't remember if it was in the thread of tweets or if it was actually on that call, but I know it was that group of people where they were talking about the Paxlovid and how you have to be really careful. And we talked about this, I think, on one of our sessions, making sure that you are eligible to take it, because of the contraindications with certain other medications and also other diseases. And I think there was somebody that their father ended up almost having a stroke because it raised their blood pressure or something. I can't remember. I can't remember if they said it or if it was just in a thread, in the tweet thread.
Yeah, I don't remember where it was, but I do remember the example, and it had to do with his medications, and I think it had to do with that he wasn't off of them prior to taking the Paxlovid. So yeah, I think it was a discussion. It wasn't a discussion piece. It wasn't in the thread. And again, I just felt really good that we had already covered that ground. They were just recovering ground that we had already been through. So we are cooking with gas over here. But I was also happy I joined the World Health Network, and glad to participate and to be a part of what's going on. But as we move forward towards, is there anything else you wanted to say about, before I go on, is there anything else you wanted to say about the Ding FIGO World Health Network?
They were just kind of talking about, because it was about politics and stuff, just kind of talking about advocating for yourself and knowing that because politics has gotten into it, we're going to have to be more vigilant and diligent about advocating for ourselves, because they use it as a weapon. If they say it's over, then they're not going to fund certain things. They don't want to fund testing. They don't want to fund vaccines. They don't want to fund research. And so it's kind of just seems like they put it on the back burner, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. or certainly that message certainly came across loud and clear. And certainly, people want to get back to, it's not, and it's more than just getting back to their lives. I mean, I don't have any issue with that. But, the fact that there's no funding or no emphasis on teaching biosafety and how to do things more safely is problematic. And I'll give you just one example of what's going to be a problem this fall. Okay, so, football season has started. There are now, a year ago, the stadiums, they had stopped ticket sales, and that I'm sure that it impacted the NFL. There are 32 teams in the NFL. So that means there's 16 games just about every Sunday. Soldier Field has 61,500 person stadium, and it's one of the smallest in the NFL. But if you figure there's, that's one of the smallest. So I'm just doing a rough guesstimate of how many people show up for football games every Sunday. So if you multiply 16 by 61,500, that comes out to about 264,000 people. 250,000 people every Sunday are going to a stadium and watching football game. Now, you might say, well, why is that? So when I'm the and so part is, we've known since 2010 at least that people don't wash their hands at stadiums. They've done all kinds of psychological and social behavioral surveys around hand washing at stadiums during sporting events. 70% of people don't wash their hands. And we have this Axios report saying that, right, June is shaking her head. Yes, that's right. We got people saying, oh, they've stopped washing their hands.
And doctor, we have a hepatitis A problem here in Alabama. And that's from not washing at restaurants. Hepatitis A is rampant here.
Okay, there you have it. So, am I going to tell you don't go to a football game?
And monkeypox.
And monkeypox. I'm not going to tell you not to go to a football game. I will say this: if you go, make sure you have some skin guard on, because you have to protect yourself against the other fools that aren't washing their hands. The person who gave the attendant some money or their credit card, and they hadn't washed their hands, and then that attendant is now handling your stuff and handling your credit card and giving it back to you. And so, I just look at it as you're walking. If you're, I'm not saying don't go. Yeah, go, but be smart about going. Don't think that you can't do anything, or that you don't need to do what you need to do to protect yourself. Because people are out there,
So, Dr. Blessman, I want to share with y'all that my job, y'all know who I work for, has said that we have to attend all hands meetings in person. And majority of them don't wear masks. And a lot of them have spreaded COVID. So I am having to have my doctor sign a reasonable accommodations paper so that I can continue to watch the all hands on Microsoft Teams, because I'm not going to assume the risk, because number one, I know they don't wash their hands. I've seen people in the bathroom not wash their hands. Number two, you're walking around with no mask, and they really don't care about who gets sick.
Right.
This is about how much risk do you want to take for yourself. So all I can tell people is protect yourself, because I'm going to protect myself. I don't want to catch COVID. I had asthma as a child. I was a childhood asthmatic. I don't know how my immune system will respond. So I'm not willing to take that risk.
There you go. There you go. And so people are those people who are walking around with no mask and who are, willing to take, just take the risk of getting COVID. They're assuming that COVID is going to act like it's going to be like any other flu. You get it, you get it, or they had it and it was done and it was over with. But they're not taking on the possibility that, or they're not considering the possibility that of getting long COVID as a result of catching COVID. And that takes it into a whole nother ball game in terms of, it doesn't act like the regular flu. It's a different kind of illness.
And also
Well,
for
that
me,
is ignorance.
Yeah, that's true. But, we can't assume, I guess it's more like we can't assume that other people are as well informed as you are. That's really what it comes down to. You've made a choice. Everybody in this group, in this meeting, has made a choice to be not only informed, but to stay up to date about what's going on. Not everybody has made that choice. I applaud you for making that choice, but not that you are way more well informed than the average general public. That's why I was reading the stats about this is where the public is and what percentage of people think it's, they think they're safe. They think they're not going to get COVID because they got a vaccine, and that's not true.
and like you said, people aren't, I don't think they're wanting the information because a lot of times it just feels so overwhelming to know that you can do all this stuff and still, people want to see an end to something. And so they don't know when the end is coming. So the easiest thing to do is, well, we're just not gonna fool it because it's just too much to think about. And I'm not a scientist, so, but for me, common sense says to me, every time a new variant comes out, it seems that they say this one is more transmissible. Because when Omicron came out, they said, oh, it's mild, but it's more transmissible, which means, and the example that I saw was before you could be in a space for 15 minutes with somebody in close contact and you were likely to contract it. But with Omicron, maybe 5 minutes. Well, with each variant, and it's more transmissible. So to me, that means indoors, outdoors, wherever. And we're not doing the distancing thing anymore. That's out
true.
of whack, like you were saying about the sporting events, because every time I look on television or something, see people at a game or see people at a sporting event or something, I'm just cringing because I'm like, look at all these people, and you can count a mask, one mask. And even doctors' offices and nurses and all that stuff, I don't know what they're being told because they're not wearing masks in all the doctors' offices. And even some of the doctors' offices, they're just wearing the regular little surgical mask and not N95s. And they're right there in patient spaces, So it's just really crazy.
Okay, well, I went to my doctor's office today and everybody had on N95 or better masks. So and they had you had one too. And if you didn't have at least an N95, they were handing out one for you. So
you remember was it last week when I said I saw that sign and they said it was from a Chicago hospital because so many of the staff had contracted COVID, they were making them go back to wearing N95, and they had to sign up there saying, if you don't have an N95, see the charge nurse.
Yep. So I'm speechless that at this point, even doctors or nurses or in a health facility, that they would not require or ask people to wear masks, particularly even if it was just for, we're coming into cold and flu season, and we know that masking will even reduce cold and flu. So I don't get it, but Um, I can't account for what other people are doing, even other people who are doctors like I am. I can't account for that. All I can do is say, share with you what it is that I know. Share with you what I have learned. Hope that you make the best decision for yourself and keep it moving. And understanding that, the people around you, they may not be doing what's, the highest or the best, but but that, what that means is that it puts you at risk. So if I were going into, like, I know that I'm getting ready to go to Rush Presbyterian to get my eyes checked up for glaucoma. But I know my ophthalmologist there, he is on it when it comes to like masking and having a good mask and the hand sanitizer. He's got my skin guard and all that. What can I say? I think, maybe it's time to take a look. If you've got somebody at this point who is saying, if you're going to a hospital that's saying that, or clinic or office that's saying you don't need to wear masks, then maybe you might want to consider whether you want to continue going there or not at this point. What risk, or do you have what it is that you need in order to be able to traverse that space safely for yourself? For yourself. I am not, I don't let COVID stop me from doing anything that I want to do. It's just that I take what it is that I need to navigate any circumstance that I may be in. And usually I'm over prepared. Most people who roll with me probably already know that, oh yeah, Dr. Jones has more than enough. I have double layers of protection for me and people around me, So, but I applaud you all for what it is that you're doing. Because I know that everybody here on this call is doing are making sure that they're doing everything that they can do that's reasonable and possible to make sure that they stay safe. And, and attempting to make sure that other people know what it is that they need to do to stay safe. Did I see a hand? I thought I saw a hand. Some questions. Oh yeah, it's also basketball season indoors and masking is not required. Yes, Carol, you're right. And so we're talking about, now is it cold and flu season, but we're in the middle of football season, and that will extend all the way through the holidays, and that's moving into the holidays. So yeah, so you're going to talk about every weekend. There'll be massive movements of people, first from football, and then basketball season starts up in January. Yeah.
So, Dr. Blessman, we know that the hospitalization rates are going to go up because everybody is not vaccinated, and everybody is not going to get vaccinated, and nor, like you said, the vaccines do not help with the transmission rate. Correct. So we will see a high number because everybody can't take that what is it, Plavacid or whatever. Everybody can't take that. If people have heart conditions and they take certain medications, they cannot take that. But I just think that it's like politics are really getting in our way. Because I was asked by my supervisor, would I still be willing to come to one of the meetings if it was a big conference meeting, and I asked, and everybody was asked to wear a mask. The problem with everybody wearing a mask, everybody doesn't wear N95 masks. When I come home from work, I take my clothes off in my garage and I spray them down before I bring them to put them in the wash machine. Because everybody is walking around with God knows what. I mean, it's like so many people, you see them, it's like you'll only see one or two of us in a store with masks on. Right. Now, I went to my allergist office today, and I think it depends on the doctor, and all the staff there had on the N95 mask. But when I went to the orthopedic doctor 2 weeks ago, my doctor did not have on a mask. So I think it depends on the type of doctor and their level of understanding of how COVID is transmitted. And some people are just taking the stance, they don't care. So you have to care about yourself.
Right. Right. Right.
Amen.
Right. What can you say on that other than put an amen on top of that? Okay. That's it.
That's right.
Yeah, so
Dr. Blessman,
yes.
back to the Novavax vaccination that you were talking about. So this doctor preferred that we do that, and that even though there's not a lot of studies that show how how long the different thing about if anybody's going to get hurt or I may die or they get sick or whatever, they haven't really with that for with the Novavax. So in spite of that, he still refers that's the best one and we should take that.
They have done the same studies that they did, the same set of studies that they did to test the efficacy of Novavax, the same way that they tested the Pfizer and the Moderna.
Mhm.
So what was interesting is that when people, if the efficacy is better than it was for the Pfizer and the Moderna, even though the context is different, because now Novavax was tested in a context where Delta was the primary variant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the efficacy was better
Mm-hmm.
than the Pfizer and the Moderna. So they're thinking, it's that it will probably be a better vaccine and have more broader protection, provide more broader protection than Moderna or Pfizer.
Yeah, they
And
don't
it's definitely
advertise.
going to be, pardon?
I said, go on. I'm sorry. Go on.
So in that case, yeah, they won't advertise that because Moderna and Pfizer's, Pfizer's all over the place.
They don't make their money.
Oh yeah, and they are, first with the vaccine, and now with Paxlovid, and Moderna's trying to sue them for stealing their intellectual property.
Oh my goodness.
So it's yeah.
It's
So,
money. It's money.
Yeah, it's money.
Do you know of anyone? Do you know of anyone who had the Novavax vaccine?
I don't know of anybody yet.
Mm-hmm.
I do know, and there were several people who have asked me about it to keep, tabs on it. And so I've kept tabs on it and I've shared with them information that it was available, but their medical records are their medical records. So I don't, I haven't gone back to ask them now, did you go get it?
Yeah.
I am correct in him saying that you could only get the Novavax if you had not had the other two, right?
Correct.
You said what? What did she say?
That you could only get the Novavax if you haven't had Moderna or Pfizer. So the Novavax is a primary series vaccine. So it's a 2-dose vaccine, and it's for those people who have not been vaccinated with either the Moderna or Pfizer. So I do have a couple of, not more than about 10 people that I know who have not been vaccinated with the Moderna or Pfizer and who was waiting for Novavax.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's me. Whatever, 11.
But the bottom line though is that, I still think that no matter whether we're vaccinated or not, I think that you got to still do the biosafety protocols, because at this point, we know that Moderna and Pfizer do not stop transmission or infection, period. And we don't know for sure if Novavax does or not. We won't know until, I'd say, about maybe 6 months from now. You know, there'll be enough people who have gotten Novavax, and they can, you know, they'll have enough data to see if it actually, and what'll be interesting would be to see if it stops, because I think Novavax was developed on the Wuhan strain, and it was tested, and it was tested while Delta was the main variant in circulation. So it'll be interesting to see how it performs, you know, in an in an Omicron environment.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing is that the Moderna Pfizer's were developed off the Wuhan strain. They started giving the shots, the vaccines, the jabs during the Delta, I believe during the Delta, right? It was Delta. And they're saying that it's now less effective against Omicron. So, you know, it's like, okay. And that's why we had to have the hybrid to come out.
Yeah.
So that they could be one that would be effective against Omicron. So we'll see.
I kind of believe that it's as long as the variants continue to change, I believe that the variants will probably all be ahead of the number of subjects that they could ever get to volunteer to be in a study.
Correct.
And then the question that I would have is, will there be a booster? Because it doesn't seem to have enough money behind it to be able to move as fast as some of the other some of the other vaccines. Yeah.
The Moderna or Pfizer.
Yeah. I mean, they got a little bit more money behind them. So, so they seem to be able to put things in place, and maybe it's because they have some understanding of the history, and because they've been in it longer. That's just me outside looking in. I would be concerned about, how do I know whether I still have it a year from now in my body? And now we are dealing with a whole new variants. So how effective is it going to be? What can I take then? I don't know. You're between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. But what I pray that doesn't happen is that you wait, and then I'll have nothing. And then you get infected. And then what do? No protection. Not that we have a lot of protection, because what we took doesn't even, it's drinking cognac and Kool-Aid.
Another thing that I saw, I think it was in the thread and not on that call. They were just talking about, like, what we've been talking about, layering of things. It's not this or that, it's this and that.
Yes.
So whatever you do, you need all of the protections. You know, you don't just need the mask, you need the air tamer. You don't need the air tamer by itself. You need the mask, you need the hand sanitizer. You need all of it together. You need to not wear your shoes in the house, and you need to spray everything. And I probably am a little bit overboard and obsessive, but I spray everything, because people aren't doing anything. So if I do something where there are other people and I don't have any control over what they do, then I'm spraying it down. If I get a paper bag, if I get some gross whatever, and I got to touch it, I'm spraying it.
So you spraying with clean spray?
I use Clean Smart and alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, depending on what I'm spraying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too.
I'm still spraying.
I got shoe covers for like because sometimes, you know, you just in a hurry forget. I keep shoe covers in my car and I got them at the door. It just helps me feel
Mm-hmm.
better.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Well, you know, we're gonna see. I mean, we will see in the next 6 months, say March, April, as we go through cold and flu season of this year. You know, all I can say is I need you in my life. I love every person that's on this call. I need you in my life. Please be safe. Please
Okay.
do what you need to do to be safe because I want to see you next week,
Okay.
next month, next
Next
year.
6 months. Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, and yeah, you know, and you know, hold, you know, place your, you know, you want, I want to see you, you know. Um, we, you know, there will be another, you know, we will get past this point. Time will pass. We will see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd rather go overboard than not have done enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so um, I want to be able to say I did everything that I reasonably knew how to do,
Mm-hmm.
rather than to be on the other side of it saying, "Oh man, what if I had done?" You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
That's
mm-mm,
right.
you know. So we were, you know, we were on. You know, I think that FIGO Ding, Dr. Ding was, you know, pointed out that, you know, it is really about not getting COVID. That's the first, you know, it's not about don't get into, you know, and I know we focused on not going into the hospital and not getting, you know, dying from it, of course, but that should not, the goal should be don't get infected, period.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, you know, and that's not where our country is at this point. They don't care whether you get infected or not because they're not looking at what are going to be the long-term implications if you've got
Mm-hmm.
if the masses of people get COVID and then have some long-term chronic illness,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Okay.
because even if at the end of the day, if everybody ended up getting COVID and 10% of us ended up having a chronic illness, that's going to raise you know, that's going to raise havoc. That's not good. You know, so there's no percentage, you know, and I do, you know, and I'm aware that on some level, you know, there's been some decision made about what's an acceptable death rate,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because if we were living with about, I mean, at its worst, the flu killed 1,000 in 2017, 2018 flu season. The flu, the average death rate from the flu was about 1,000 people a week. That's the average. 52,000 people died of the flu that year. That was the birth. So right now, you know, now they're saying that the death rate dropped 68%, which would be good if it did, because that would put it at about what the typical flu death rate was,
Mm-hmm.
dropped 68%. I just don't know that that number is really accurate or real, because if it was real, you would think that there'd be some hallelujahs, you know, champagne
Who
popping
is
and
the
all that
source
kind of
of
stuff
that
going on.
number?
Pardon?
Who is the source of that number?
It was on the CDC website.
Hmm.
You know, this the website that I go to every week to get the nowcast, here I'll get it, the CDC variant tracker.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it in
Chat.
yeah, I'll put it in the chat. Yep. I said, oh, what is going on here?
Hmm.
Uh, I'm gonna send it to everyone. Here we go, paste. So it's the CDC variant tracker.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was really shocked. I said, could this be correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so it's in the chat now. You know,
So I have a organization that I have been following for about 7 years on Twitter. It's called Healthcare Dive, and there's always some great articles about the healthcare industry, healthcare delivery industry. And so the article that I pulled up, it says hospitals sending distress flare after billions in projected 2022 losses.
Mm.
So that sentence goes, hospitals are sending up a distress flare about our ability to provide the care and services our communities need and depend on the future of healthcare in this country. So they are pointing to COVID pandemic as being the driver for all of this money that they have lost, and not only revenue, but labor.
Mm.
So
yes.
most of them are contracting their nurses. They're using, they're outsourcing. And when you outsource this profession, your overtime pay is through the roof. You are paying their, if your regular nurse is making $21 an hour, this contract nurse, you have to pay their organization a percentage. So you're paying like $40 an hour plus overtime pay. And sometimes these nurses are travel nurses, so you have to pay for their lodging as well. So we're in a quagmire outside of people being nonchalant about COVID and their movement. No mask, no protection, nothing. Plus, the hospitals are sending distress flares. And the article goes on to say that they've lost a lot of federal funding. Well, that money was moved to COVID responses for states. States like Alabama, who gave their COVID money to build prisons. We are in a very peculiar place, even though it's like the quiet before a storm.
Mm.
And right now it's a little quiet. People aren't dying as rapidly, but they're still dying. I got a phone call earlier this week. A friend wanted to know about our California trip, and he's in California. 3 of his colleagues died of COVID transmission just about the same time that I was there, Dr. Blessman, we were taken in Los Angeles. So people are still dying. People that, we are 3-4 degrees away from are still dying. So that death rate, even though, it's not as high as it used to be, it's not zero.
So first of all, let me just say that when I saw that 68% drop, I knew that there's some feces have hit the fan somewhere, and that's some BS.
Right.
Okay.
Big
Okay.
time.
It's like,
Exactly. I mean, if corporate, the corporate rich class, corporate capitalism by any means necessary class.
Something is wrong with that number. I smell BS.
Yeah, it is. It's most, and
So-
then you have a natural disaster in Florida, right? So you have the feces that's in the water that's carrying the COVID. The people who are swimming and floating in the water who are able to live, right? And then you have the rescuer coming to get them, and they are swimming in feces of COVID. So we haven't seen the last of this
Right.
at all.
So if you figure if the country was hit by a major storm that hit the eastern seaboard, we don't know what the reporting was really like in this last week.
No, we don't.
And we
So-
are, and it's gonna be out of Florida. Everything about Florida is crooked.
Yes, everything.
So the numbers are not gonna be real, but that's always my concern. I mean, if you're trying to get to a safe place and you have to wade in the poo-poo water to get to the dry surface. I mean, probably the last thing you're thinking about is the poo-poo water. You just trying
Right.
Right.
save yourself.
You're just trying to stay alive, like breathing, right?
Exactly. But you're gonna feel it later on.
Right.
But then they'll be able to unattach it to that. You know, they'll attach it to your lifestyle and blah, 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 and A, B, C, D, E. So, you know, if it was left up to me, I would then be taking everything I could take to detox my system.
I would have left. I don't know. I don't know. I told my mother we would have that wouldn't have been a.
Well, that's if you could have gotten a flight out, you know, because
like
they were canceling flights everywhere. I'll share something with you guys that I've discovered. So since my COVID, I have gone and got all of my labs done. My cholesterol, my kidney, my liver, everything done. And what's amazing to me is some of my numbers have changed substantially. So things that I had under control, like my cholesterol, my high blood pressure, is now out of control. So even though I'm seeing the acupuncturist and I'm feeling better, I have now called the hospital to become a patient in the COVID long haul clinic because I want to be heavily monitored now. I want to know what's changing before it gets out of control. Now, I don't feel bad, but I'm looking at all of my numbers. I'm comparing last year. I'm comparing May of 2022.
Oh, wow. That's not even 6 months.
Right. And then I'm comparing last year, October 2021 to now. I got a lot of H's by some of my numbers. And that means I'm high. And so I have now sent out a letter to my cardiologist, to my rheumatologist, to my endocrinologist, to my primary care. And I'm pretending like I'm only talking to one doctor, but I want them all to go over my labs with me on a video call. And I want them to tell me what they think I should do. Because I know something is going on. How did I have such great numbers and now it's out of control?
Miss Shirley, you know you can answer that for yourself as a scientist, as you have laid out your plan and looking at your numbers.
I'm just happy that I went ahead and thought to do that because I wouldn't have even thought that my cholesterol was out of control. I only eat organic and plant-based.
It doesn't matter, Miss Shirley.
Yeah.
You as a scientist, you know that they are not truly studying what the long-term effects
yeah.
of this virus, and they are not studying what this virus does to people that already have certain illnesses and ailments and their immune systems are weakened. So if we're not studying any of that, then you can have any long-term effects. So I think that and I think Eddie Joe would agree with me, that by you going to the acupuncturist and a chiropractor, you're doing the right thing. I think eventually that as you move along and your immune system gets better, I believe your numbers will come back and stabilize. They may never go back to normal, but they are going to improve as you improve.
Well, when I showed them to my acupuncturist, he said, okay, we need to come up with a different plan. So we're focusing on your lungs. But now I want to treat your spleen. I want to treat your lungs. I want to treat your liver. I want to treat your kidney. I want to treat your what do you call it? My abdominal system, my stomach.
Digestive.
Yes, right, GI. And I said, okay. I said, well, that's a good plan. I said, but oh my God, are you gonna have to stick me for all of those areas in one day?
Miss Shirley, you'll be okay because you know that they stick them in the meridian. But you'll be okay because a lot of that stuff intersects, so you will be just fine.
Well, you know what he said? He said, listen, nobody's never did this.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Nobody's never did this. So we're not working in the dark anymore.
Exactly.
We're gonna now have a plan. So but I also have a video conference with my cardiologist because I want to know what she got to say.
Yep.
Right.
And I want to know what the endocrinologist has to say. Because, I'm gonna start eliminating incompetent doctors too. I'm not gonna be wasting time with stuff with people. I can guess. So I don't need them guessing. I need for them to, have a plan. Now, when I signed up for the Colbic Long Haul Clinic, I could not get an appointment until February.
What?
Wow.
No.
So I'm glad I'm doing acupuncture.
Oh my God.
Because that's how that they are. But then, think about it. They didn't have a cancer clinic until they had a lot of cancer, right? So they now have a long haul clinic.
Isn't this at Northwestern?
All the hospitals. Huh?
Isn't this at Northwestern?
Yes, and all the hospitals. So I have to see a pulmonologist as well as a pulmonologist, and a neurologist. Those are the two that they have me scheduled with initially. So, and a little bit of it is I'm curious to see. I'm not going to cancel. I don't care if it's next June, I'm going, because I just want to see what they're going to do, what's their game plan, what's happening. Why did all of a sudden these hospitals start putting these long haul clinics in place? Everybody got them now. So it's because of all of the issues that are showing up now. So this is the long-term effect. The bottom line is if you can keep the invisible man out of your body, that's your best bet. Keep him out.
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
So I wanted to just kind of clarify what Ms. Christie was saying is no one is doing the research at the primary care and ambulatory setting. There might not be any in-depth research, but there is a lot of academic research that is happening behind the scenes. And not necessarily because of people of color who were impacted the most, but because they want to make sure that the population is going to be safe in the future. So there is an in-depth study that has happened and is still happening with testing mothers' breast milk or the SARS-CoV virus if it's being transmitted to the infant, to the baby, if they're breastfeeding. Most major hospital organizations have long haul COVID clinics, but I don't think that they are drilling down to the level of medical information or decision making like Miss Shirley is experiencing now with her specialist. And I like how you said that you were going to start eliminating the doctors who are incompetent. I would say, the doctors who are not keeping up with the latest medical outbreaks and understanding. I have a problem with those physicians because if they were keeping up with the transmission rate and the long haul COVID illnesses, then I think that they would have a mask mandate or a mask requirement on their front door. As my primary care physician does, most patients that come into the clinic, they have their mask on, but there was one gentleman who came in who didn't have his mask, and they didn't say anything to him, but so there's always one bad apple in the bunch. But there is a lot of research happening, and we are going to know more and more about this virus and its effect on the human body as the days, months, and years move on. So
I don't think it's going to happen very soon.
well, there's they have we don't, I mean, if you're not in the medical journal, like you have to, so the information is not on Google.
Yeah, I
You
understand that.
you can't Google it and get an academic research paper worth its weight. Most times you have to have some type of academic ID, so that you can access those journal articles. And
You don't have to have an academic ID. You just have to be willing to pay for the subscriptions to those.
yeah, some of them will, it depends on your qualifications. If you are part of an organization, I have had, even in school, I have had to get someone who had higher access than me to get an article that I wanted to use.
I have higher access than any of y'all.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So there are some journals.
Right.
There is research happening.
And I just pulled it up, Michelle. So
Mhm.
one of our congressmen, he used to be the governor of Virginia, Tim Kaine, he has long-term COVID effects. So he has introduced a bill as of March the 2nd, 2022, into Congress to fund research at NIH.
Yes.
So I'm sure that they are working on it, but like Ms. Shirley said, this is not going to happen overnight.
No.
And they can't publish data that has not been approved.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
and that has not been vetted, because there are some things that I want to share with y'all off of a website, but I cannot share it with you until they say that it can be released to the public.
Right.
Right. Oh, like, yes, but what I'm saying is there is things that are happening in the background and the information is coming into fruition. Most of it is not going to be available right away, but the approach that you're taking, Ms. Shirley, to getting a better understanding of how this virus has impacted your physiology is the first that I have heard, right?
Using myself as a guinea pig, to be honest.
Yeah, I get it,
I'm
but
using me.
Miss Shirley,
Yeah.
I think that you need to reach out to NIH, and I will try to find you a contact. I think you need to join one of those studies at NIH in Bethesda.
yes. Especially if NIH has a program that is doing that, because this, you can go to your primary care physician and get a CBC with diff or without. You can get, several lipid panels, your TSH. You can get all of that. That should be part of your wellness preventive medicine visit. Now, this is what I really like about this community, and I know we're going over, but sometimes this is what y'all worry me, because we have a policy making form right here. If 75% of African Americans have had COVID, then if you have any kind of health care, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, commercial insurance, part of your preventive health wellness at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, in the end of the year, whenever you do it, if that's how you visit your primary care. But now you're talking about policy. At the wellness level is where you get all of your labs drawn. And hopefully, and maybe through these COVID clinic studies, this can be part of our benefit offering.
Okay, but here's the problem. Because you can only get labs drawn once a year and paid for once a year.
Right.
Unless you have a diagnosis.
Exactly.
And it depends on the doctor.
Yeah.
So the endocrinologist can order the same thing as a cardiologist.
But you're in a different situation.
But I'm just saying, all you have to do is go to them and say, listen, I have this I want to be concerned about. Now, what I'm doing now is I'm sharing the same labs with everybody. But the reality, I know that I could go to every one of them individually and get what I need, because sometimes it's just a matter of asking. I mean, what purpose do they serve?
But
if they can't tell you you're doing better.
But at the policy, I'm speaking of policy, Ms. Shirley, not on the individual level. At the policy level with government insurance, they pay for the wellness preventive care.
I know. I'm going to get that done. I got it scheduled for December.
Exactly.
That will be my test to compare my numbers that I have right now. But I didn't use wellness to go get all the labs that I just got.
Right, exactly. Right.
To get all the labs that I just got. I just use them all, at different times individually. And then I write letters to everybody and share everything. And then that's when I schedule my video calls, because I make everybody go over the numbers. And then I see what they say.
Right. So part of the problem
everybody's not concerned about my thyroid numbers. It would maybe just be my endocrinologist and my primary care.
Right. Well, it starts with your PCP, right?
Well,
it starts at
my PCP is not involved yet at all. I just called them today.
No, I'm saying it should start at the PCP level. Now, Ms. Shirley, you know, you are
Shirley's different.
completely, yeah,
Shirley
you're
rubbed her
completely
shoulder.
far
Shirley
advanced.
is different.
I mean, you can
I
go
mean,
outside of
I'm
the.
not going through all those steps.
Mhm.
I just feel like listen, if you're taking care of me as a patient and I
Mhm.
have some concerns, then you have to tell me you don't want to treat me
Exactly.
and I'll go away.
Mhm.
But if you're going to be my doctor, you're going to have to respond to what I'm
Right.
asking or give me an explanation. I don't give a damn what the insurance says.
Mhm.
And you're right, Miss
Deal with
Shirley.
them if I need to deal with them.
You're right.
So
You're being your advocate. You're being your own best advocate. And that's what everyone has to do, is be your own best advocate. It has nothing to do with if you have the money or whatever the insurance to pay for those tests. If you can maneuver the system, Michelle, I know that you are health policy, but a lot of times those of us that are scientists like Miss Shirley, when I had to take care of my mother in the nursing home and she had a rare disorder, we have to work around those. And a lot of the primary care doctors are not up on their game. So
No.
you have to be up
all
on
you're going
your
to do
game.
is just read the numbers and refer you out.
Right.
Exactly.
But that's
then-
but that's the point. So when you have so part of our demise is that we don't have access. And if it's just limited access or limited knowledge or limited understanding of the fact that we have had a major virus pandemic that is still here, still mutating, still transmitting, and we're fighting it with on multiple fronts, right? We're fighting it with vaccines, we're fighting it with some treatment, but at the end of the day, the virus is still here. There has been, quite a few people in our population who have had COVID more than one time. Some people say it's the flu, some people have long haul issues, but what we don't have is policy. What we do have is evidence of hospitals saying that they are taking a loss for this virus.
But that has nothing to do with me. I'm just
No, not you, Miss Shirley, right? Like this is beyond, this is
I just think that the bottom line is, if we don't become advocates for ourselves,
Yep.
if we don't ask questions, if
Yep.
we don't ask, can you, will you, then it's not going to happen, period.
So Michelle, what can you do or we do to impact that policy? Because you are the health policy person. So are you willing to help write some policy and get us to help provide you input? What are you proposing?
right. So there isn't anything that is proposed, maybe not. I see that Tim is introducing a bill into Congress so that we can have access to funding to long haul COVID studies, which will result in some type of benefit change. Because at the end of the day, you want people to have more access than not.
Exactly.
And one thing that we have learned in this community is people are not educated. Period. Bottom line. When Dr.
Sometimes they don't want to be.
Exactly.
They don't want to be educated. You can't force people to eat.
Exactly.
And they don't want to eat.
But you can teach them how to fish, right? So we have 17 people, 20 people in our community. Miss Carol is a COVID ninja. Miss Shirley is a COVID ninja. I know Eddie Jones is a COVID ninja. Miss Christie is a COVID ninja. Dr. RV, we know she's a COVID ninja. So it's not like the people who have been dedicated to understanding what this virus is doing and how it's moving. Dr. Blessman has a kinship, friendship with a young lady in California who has never been on our program, but had us take our shoes off at the door of her cute little apartment in west side of Culver City, California, and had every mask that Dr. Blessman suggested, skin guard, I mean, everything. So it's not like everybody is turning a blind eye, but we think about the culture that we're living in. People are straight up distracted. So, there is no reinforcement in educating people on the fact that they can be safe. They can be more safe than what they're doing now. And they don't, so they put the mask on, they got the hand sanitizer that bled away within 30 seconds, and they went about their jolly way. And when the mask recommendations were over, they took the mask off. Some still have the alcohol hand sanitizer. I see it on the little desk at the restaurants, and people are trying to get back to normal. That does not mean we won't have a class of people who will be literally sick in the next 20 years. It doesn't matter how you access your health care. Hold on. It doesn't matter how knowledgeable you are about you. When you have a mass of people who are sick, those healthcare dollars rise on you too. And the way that we can try to get a bottleneck on this in some form or fashion is to influence policy in such a way that people will be able to have access to the labs that will give you more information about long haul and roll it up into your preventive wellness program that is paid for. Generally, big house commercial insurances, it's free.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Michelle.
Yeah.
One of the, Dr. Eric Feigl, because you were the one that came up with, told me about him first. That group there's a group, World Health Network. It's free to join. You should join it because that's exactly what they're talking about. How do we, changing healthcare policy? That's his specialty. And I think that that's the place, I'm ready to sign on anything that we can sign in on. But I think that, that is the direction that they're moving into. So.
And I think the long haul clinics, I think that those clinics are put in place to filter data.
Yes.
Who's coming through? What type of signs and symptoms?
Agreed.
How did you treat them? What worked? What didn't work?
Mm-hmm.
The hospital is gathering that information.
Yep.
They forwarding
But
it.
also, Michelle, if you want to impact your public health policy, you have got to get the people out to vote in Alabama for competent people. And then you have got to start writing your senators and representatives.
Girl, I am not doing nothing here in Alabama. They can have Alabama.
Well, I'm trying to tell you that
I'm
is
sorry,
key.
sister. My sister girlfriend is in here, but it's the if
But
I were
that
a younger
is
woman, yes.
You've got to go back to our grassroots as Black people, and we know that's the church. That is key, Michelle.
Yeah, well,
because now I can reach out to Tim Kaine personally because he is my senator, and I can tell him that I really want to push him. I can write him every day on email if I need to, and even schedule a meeting with him. And maybe I can invite him to one of our meetings. I'll see if I can get that done. But you have to get the big people involved, and that to get anything done.
Yeah, to move the needle.
Oh yeah, they have to know. I mean, so that's part of the problem with these administrations. At most of the time, you don't have anyone at the grassroots level helping you to understand what actually is happening with people and the distraction and how you have to and how you influence a group of people who are distracted in certain ways. Like TikTok is a big time distraction for our people. So you influence them through creating TikTok, whatever they do. I like TikTok, but I find I can't get on it like that. Or, you have to influence policy to get to people at a grassroots level so that they can at least get, if it's crumbs, that they getting something. Because right now, they get nothing. Right now, they're getting rationalized care because these hospitals are overworked, and they could be, a lot of them getting, subline care because their primary care physician is not engaged. So
But I think, Michelle, I think, you have persons like yourself who analyze things from a global perspective, and that's wonderful. I can advance change on my level.
yes.
That affects me. Okay. And so I'm needing to get things done for me.
Mhm.
And so I know that what I'm doing is going to educate me,
Mhm.
which I'm going to affect change.
Well, what you're doing is brilliant, Miss Shirley. I mean, I haven't even thought of anything like that to see. But I mean, you were a groundbreaker when you were going to have your levels checked to make sure that you had the right level of protection, your immune antibodies being checked. And you were not playing with that.
All along the way, yeah.
So
Dr. Blessman,
It is 8:50, it is 9:00, yes,
Dr. Blessman.
Yeah.
yes.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
just quick, just because the conversation has been so really good back and forth with the dialogue. I just want to mention one thing from listening to everybody. It has occurred to me that we've had one guest on who has been involved and asked for people to be involved in studies they were doing. And that was the person who developed the nitric oxide
Yes.
and talked to us about that.
Mhm.
I don't know how the community feels, but it would be good to know where is,
What happened with that?
yeah, where's he and his studies, and he's asked for, and remember, they were going to do studies specifically involving Black people.
right.
So it would be good. Shirley, you said something that triggered in terms of being involved with studies. Want to know, did he get someone from any of our groups or any of the cities where we live, or where is he standing with any of this? And what can he share with us currently? Because I think it's been about a year since he's been with
A
us.
year. Yes, it has been. It's been a year.
Okay. That's all I want to say.
Okay, well, the conversation has been robust, and I hate to cut it off, but it is 9:01. And before we leave, I did want to share something with the group. We will continue this conversation next week, and Ms. Karen Richmond's going to come on, and we're going to talk about behavior change, biosafety protocols, and some new stuff that we can use, some new tools that we can use. I'm going to go into screen share just for a second, because we talk about how we want to thrive and not just survive during this pandemic. And I'm just so proud of one of our members. I'm just waiting for okay, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. One of our community members has written a book during this pandemic. So she's a prime example of how to thrive, not just survive during this pandemic. So we just want to give it up for Dr. Cato. Yay, Dr. Cato. Her book is out. And as we think about thriving and not just surviving, but also how we're going to do it gracefully and with vigor and with joy. I love that she wants to change the narrative on aging, particularly now, because we're living in a time right now where, you know, we got this pandemic going on, and they're kind of treating older people like they're expendable to some extent. But we're fighting back, and we're not having it. But I just love some of the messages that's in the book regarding intentionality, in terms of grace, in terms of being present, and and staying morally anchored. And so this is the cover of her new book. I think the book launch is January. There will be a book launch October 15th, Sunday, from 2 to 5 in Chicago. But for those of you who are interested, this is the information about the book and how to get it. And I hope.
I need to get some information about the launch. Can I come?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think I will make sure that I connect the two of you. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And you look fabulous.
Oh, no pun intended.
Absolutely fabulous. You almost don't look too much different from 50 to 60.
Thank you. I know the hour is late. We can, we'll take a few minutes, maybe next, with Doc's permission, Doc and Michelle, and discuss it a little bit more. Would love to have you guys come, anybody in town anyway, come to the launch. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, June Johnson, for your congratulations. And thank you, Doc. Doc is very modest. She is the person who wrote the review on the back of the book. And Eddie Joe wrote the foreword and was the editor-in-chief. So we can talk about it a little bit more next week. I think we still have time.
Yes, we have one more Tuesday before the actual book launch.
Right.
So, but I did want to show it, and
thank you.
We'll have this the slide up at the top of the hour next week.
Okay.
But anyway, but this is about being productive, and and it's like the pandemic didn't stop Sandra from living out her dream, which was to write this book. And it's like, okay, so and that's what at the end of the day, this is what we want to see, is that this pandemic didn't stop you. If anything, maybe it energized you or made you get much more intentional about what was important to you and what it is that you wanted to accomplish and achieve.
And thank you. Who's this? Renee, Nia, Shirley. Thank you, you guys. It's so nice to be, congratulated. So it's a good thing. Just kind of hitting the press, and everything's very new. It's been a lot of hard work. So, but it's about a good cause and a good thing. Yeah, I'll talk more about it. And it is dedicated to lessons that I learned from both of my parents. And it's written against the backdrop of the fruit of the spirit and the 7 contrary virtues. So I'll stop there because it's late. And you guys are wonderful. Like Doc always says, love you guys. Thank you very much. I am humbled.
Yes. Okay. So on that note, stay safe. We we not only, our intent is to thrive, not just survive during this pandemic. And so we want all of you to live robust and joyful lives and fulfill all it is that your soul was intended to fulfill on this journey that we call life.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Oh, looking forward to seeing you all next Tuesday.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Love you.
Thank
And I
you.
got the best team. Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome, Dr. Blackman.
Thank you, Dr. Blessman.